Hello, good morning, or whenever you're listening to this or watching this. Today, we got a cool guest, Gary, the executive director and founder of Seven Generations Ahead, has done many tasks in the Oak Park, Illinois, and surrounding communities. He does it with his organization, but also I wouldn't be surprised if he does it not when he's working. He's always sustainable and thinking. So we talk about C4, the Cross Community Climate Collaborative, as well as D200, D97, and sustainability policy in the country and the world and locally. Hope you enjoy the show. Hey Gary, thanks for coming on the podcast. You just want to give a little introduction about yourself and what you do and your organization?
Yeah, I'm the founder and executive director of Seven Generations Ahead. We're in our 24th year as a sustainable communities nonprofit. We work on climate, equity, sustainability across the Chicago metro area, across the state of Illinois, and occasionally work in other Midwest states. And we do a lot of network building, coalition building. We produce conferences, but we also have a handful of programs that we implement related to food waste reduction, food recovery and composting, related to local sustainable food procurement, and then also related to clean energy and energy efficiency. We're really dedicated to driving change in relationship to the climate crisis, but also helping to build a local, sustainable, resilient food system in the state that reduces its waste.
That's so cool. For those who don't know, I was an IOF alum. And why don't you talk about It's Our Future and some of the programs you do? You were just talking about compost and food waste. What do you do related to that and other things?
Yeah, so some years ago, it's probably, let me do the math here, at least 6 years ago, I think, maybe seven, I think it was 2018. I made a pitch to the Oak Park River Forest Community Foundation's Big Idea Challenge, and we were selected among 5 projects to do kind of like a Shark Tank presentation in front of a couple hundred people, and we did it with another student at OPRF. And we won the challenge, and so that enabled me to start It's Our Future using their funding, and essentially It's Our Future is designed to equip youth to advocate for climate solutions and their futures, and we do a lot of education with youth around the climate crisis, just kind of bring everybody up to speed on what's happening. But we also build advocacy skills and try to engage youth in local community action. And so sometimes that takes the face of presenting to school boards or to village governments or other decision makers. In other cases, it's engaging in processes to create sustainability policies and to support the implementation of those policies. And so we're trying to do that with all of the It's Our Future schools that are interested. And then, of course, the third piece is really providing the youth with an understanding of what's happening globally around climate. And so for 5 years, we've taken youth to the UN climate summits. And that's been a big part of what we do as well.
Nice. And for those who don't know, it's the big global climate conference where all of these powerful, buffy, douchey decision makers come, and sometimes you feel intimidated, but it's like a museum. I went there, COP20, I think, and I'm sure you also, well, yeah, I'm curious what you think of that craziness, because you go take students almost every year right through that program.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting case study, and how do you get close to 200 countries to agree on a goal and work toward it together. And in this case, the goal is to try to stay within 1.5 degrees Celsius of increased temperature so that we don't incur even greater extreme weather events and disasters and other impacts of the warming climate. It's a really challenging task. I mean, governments have their own agendas. They are there's always tension between developing nations and developed nations. of the developed nations are responsible for causing most of the greenhouse gas emissions, and many of the underdeveloped nations are the ones that are bearing the greatest brunt but causing the fewer amounts of emissions. And so there's always a tension there, and a lot of the developing nations are, they have been advocating for funding to support just dealing with what's happening to people and to their environment in relationship to the climate, a lot of disasters and other kinds of events. So it's a hard thing to do, and there's also, all the geopolitical conflicts. Of course, the war in Ukraine that Russia has aggravated and continues to pursue, and that has an impact on what happens at the UN climate summits. There's all kinds of tensions there. But the goal is to get each country to agree, which they did in Paris, to agree to emissions reductions goals and then to report on those. But the reporting has been really inconsistent and in some cases non-existent for many countries. And so there are some really big issues facing that whole process, but they continue to convene.
Speaking of the global stage, I feel like now we're both from the U.S., and for some reason, I haven't studied in other countries, but it might be the same in climate change is political in Canada too. Like Republicans, especially this administration, don't seem to want to take climate change seriously. So in a way, I feel like climate change, you can do more at home than fighting those big battles. But I know you're doing both. So can you talk a little bit about like what you're doing with C4 and this CAS stuff, which I find really interesting?
Yeah.
And how that might impact our communities and reach big targets?
Yeah, great question. When the federal government decides that it doesn't want to play, and when it decides that climate change is not real and starts to cut back all of the funding, all of the programs, cutting back agencies, staff, all of the things, the federal government starts to do things like that. It just underscores how important state and local action is in relationship to climate. So some years ago, we developed a project called the Cross Community Climate Collaborative. It was actually founded by 3 mayors, Mayor Katrina Thompson from Broadview, President Vicky Skaman from the Village of Oak Park, and President Kathy Aducci from the Village of River Forest, and Darnell Johnson from the Urban Efficiency Group, and myself from 7 Generations Ahead. And we were able to get 14 mayors to sign an MOU to work collaboratively on climate equity and sustainability. And so we've been really supporting the communities in their own sustainability efforts, but we've also developed specific projects to advance clean energy or advance food waste reduction and composting and advance local sustainable food and workforce development and energy efficiency and all the things that we're working on. And that project is great because it has us working specifically with institutions in these communities like village governments and park districts and K through 12 schools and libraries, and then, to some degree, faith-based organizations and commercial businesses, and really working with them to advance strategies that are going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and improve the quality of life. Really committed to making sure that if we're advancing clean energy projects, that we're incorporating a workforce development and jobs for residents, particularly in underserved communities, so that there are community benefits related to economics for the communities, in addition to health benefits and in addition to all the environmental benefits. And so we're advancing a project that focuses on on-site solar, utilizing what's remaining of the Inflation Reduction Act tax credits, and then we're created 3 municipal composting programs with village governments for residents, and then we're implementing our Zero Waste Schools program in schools in Broadview, Bellwood, and Maywood as well. So that's C4. The CASE initiative is really an outgrowth of the project that we've been facilitating called Planet Green, developed implementation strategies and have been implementing that for 10 years. The plan is now beyond its 10-year life, and so the project Planet Green continues to work with the institutions to advance strategies across the board. The Cross-Agency Sustainability Exchange, or CASE, is a collaboration between Oak Park Elementary District, Oak Park River Forest High School District 200, the Village of Oak Park, and then myself. And so we brought in facilitators, we created working groups around energy, food and waste, green infrastructure, and climate education. And so each of those working groups over 4 months roughly now have been creating mini strategic plans that can be implemented over an 18-month period. And we're just at the point now of finalizing those plans.
Nice, yeah. It's like a lot of times this idea just popped into my head, but I hear it a lot too. People say we are the future, or like people under 35, as the UN defines it, are the future, and I would agree. But like for people over 35 that work in, let's say, are a superintendent of a school and don't have an environmental club, like how can they reach out to you and like maybe create a sustainability plan? Or same thing goes for towns, because a lot of the work the students have ideas for, but in some communities there's no climate education, and therefore students don't feel empowered or knowledgeable to do it. So like if other people besides students are interested, or students, how do they get involved with SGA and many programs?
Yeah, so that's a good question. There's a lot of ways. One, I mean, they can contact us directly and we can connect them to the It's Our Future meetings. And so if they're interested in getting involved in It's Our Future, that's kind of, one of the vehicles that we've used to promote the development of sustainability policies in schools. And so we have a toolkit. We've worked the process a handful of times with different schools, and we've also done it with communities. Seven Generations Ahead also has an intern program, and so sometimes college and graduate student level students are engaging as interns. But we're a very sort of open and receptive organization. If a student wants to get involved, we can point them in the right direction, even if it's not through one of our programs. And then for communities, similarly, we just have to have a conversation and figure out what the community is interested in. If they're interested in developing a sustainability plan, we can support that. We've actually done five community plans and have supported community plans as well. But they might be interested in a particular strategy, like maximizing the amount of on-site solar in their communities, or getting reduced rate solar to low to moderate income residences, or increasing the energy efficiency of the buildings. All of those things we have strategies for, and we have technical experts that we're linked to, and we can help to support and facilitate that, in addition to any of the stuff I said earlier about food waste reduction and composting and local sustainable food. Where we don't have deep dive expertise, we know who the experts are, and so we play a role of connecting technical experts to mainstream institutions.
That's always good to know where the experts are. Might I add, you all are also very expertise in that area, so don't discredit yourself. I believe you were definitely a teacher, either history or science, or maybe I'm completely off.
Spanish.
Oh, Spanish, yeah, I was off. But how, before SGA, and how did you have a climate story back then, or how did you get involved in climate change and sort of spark this idea to start SGA?
Yeah, love the question. No, I didn't study anything about climate change at all when I was in high school or college, or in many of the jobs that I'd worked before Seven Generations Ahead. But in one of them, I was in I did organizational development consulting internationally. Like anybody, I was just kind of reading all these sort of email updates globally about what was happening within our environment and all these sort of catastrophes. And at first it sounded like something here, something there, and then it was just all the time. You're hearing about all the craziness. And so at some point it just kind of hit me over the head like a rock that my oldest son, who was 4 at the time, if he were to ask me in later years, Dad, did you see anything coming with respect to this environmental crisis and the climate crisis? And if so, what did you choose to do about it? If I didn't have a good answer to that question, I felt some kind of a credibility crisis. And so it was literally at that moment that I decided that I was going to figure out a way to start an environmental organization that worked on global issues on a local level. So it took me a lot of years, actually. I did a lot of research, talked to a lot of people, a lot of informational interviews, went out to conferences, and then finally launched 7 Generations Ahead in November of 2001. And here we are.
Nice. I saw you went to the Aspen Ideas Conference.
Mm-hmm.
Were there like any big takeaways or any thoughts that you think should be amplified?
Yeah, I was so impressed by the Aspen Ideas Climate Chicago 2025 conference. They brought in some cases, really high-level thought leaders on particular topics. I went to one session around carbon capture, and carbon capture has been looked at by most environmentalists as just sort of a way for the oil and gas industry to say, hey, see, we're capturing carbon and we can continue to burn fossil fuels and it won't be an issue. But carbon capture is actually much more amplified and broad than just direct air capture. The realities are that, number one, it's underfinanced. Number two, it's not cost effective. And number three, the amount of carbon that's being captured currently is minimal. However, there are many other technologies, including infusing alkaline into oceans, that increases carbon sequestration, and using biomass and biochar and other sort of strategies that really mimic natural processes to capture carbon. And those technologies are developing. They need more funding, and the goal is to have them scale so that carbon capture can actually be a viable strategy, at least one piece of the puzzle in relationship to the effort to mitigate carbon and to reduce carbon emissions. So I thought that was really interesting. I had a nice exchange with former State of Washington Governor Jay Inslee. Asked him a question about climate policy and how climate policy needs to be, on a state level, attracting private capital. And as you know from attending the COP event, John Kerry and John Podesta and others, Jennifer Granholm, they've all said that and other government leaders, Antonio Gutierrez, who is the president of the United Nations, he and others have said governments can't do this. Governments can't do it alone. They can play a role. So the state of Washington has a cap and invest policy that attempts to do that. And I think in Illinois, we should try to figure out a way, maybe it's combining state funding and funding from some of the climate advocate billionaires that are out there, but figure out some sort of way where we can incentivize private capital to continue to invest in clean energy, now that the Inflation Reduction Act is going away, and so maximize the use of the private capital, keep that money flowing toward projects that are going to, support clean energy. So that was, for me, those were a couple of takeaways. It was a wonderful event to meet new people, but also to connect with some local Chicago collaborators.
Nice, yeah, that's cool. Conferences can be long and boring, but they can also be educational. So if people are on the fence, I would say go. I take a 4-hour nap afterwards, but that's just me. And maybe you might too. Now, a new segment we're starting on the podcast is sort of where I have people that know Gary or the guest, if they have any burning questions for you. So this episode, we have Becky, the Zero Waste School's senior program manager, that works with you, and then former mayor of Park David Pope. Becky had a few questions and was wondering, what is your advice to people who want to do something about the climate crisis?
I think, and it's interesting, I just read Tom Steyer's book. One of the things that he says, which I think is really valuable, is that you have to start somewhere, right? And you know, if working on climate is brand new to you, then you know, start by maybe implementing a few strategies at home, and then figure out who else in your neighborhood or who else in your community is working on this, and see if you can, you know, get involved in some local community efforts around climate change. And then if you're really interested, figure out a way to get trained up, and that could mean going to conferences, it could mean going to a college or university that has a sustainability minor or major. If you're really passionate about this, then put yourselves in positions like through internships, or if you can get jobs, but put yourself in position to get experience and talk to people, learn about what they're doing, do informational interviews, but eventually get your foot in the door somewhere, and then that could lead to a job. So many, there are now more sustainability coordinator, director jobs than there ever have been. I remember when there was hardly anything out there. So it's really a prime opportunity if you want to really get more involved to figure out a way. But even if you're not a director or coordinator, most jobs these days are going to require some knowledge about sustainability. So continue to educate yourself. And
good advice. Last question was, how do you stay hopeful despite the setbacks those of us involved in the environmental movement encounter on a regular basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. It gets asked. I guess my take on it is this. You know, we are probably experiencing one of the greatest setbacks in terms of the repealing of policy that was effective. Again, so much happens on the local level and the state level. We still have to do the work on the local level, so that focus never changes. And we can't let, you know, you certainly can have feelings about, you know, what the current Trump administration is doing, and be angry about it and lose hope, but you know, you just can't let that stop you. The analogy that I laughingly say is, you know, during this period of time, I have to go out and buy more baseball bats because I'm going to be taking more swings and working harder and figuring out ways to implement strategies on a local level with our local institutions. And so I think you have to develop an attitude that nothing is going to stop me. I'm going to move forward on this, and I'm going to work with other people who are going to move forward on this and build strength through local engagement.
Yes, well said. I completely agree. David unfortunately couldn't join us in person. I'm going to pull up David's questions.
What you think are some of the most impactful and significant roles or experiences that you've had while working with SGA, and the things that you've done on sort of a global basis, and as well as here at home.
Yeah, you know, I mean, one answer to the question is I had the opportunity to work closely with David Pope while he was not only he was a trustee at first, and then a two-term mayor, and David 100% supported and initiated actions in the village of Oak Park. One of the earliest projects we did is, you know, at one point the old public works facility of the village of Oak Park burst into flames and burnt, and they had to build a new facility. At that time, I had been in conversation with the Illinois Clean Energy Community Foundation about doing some LEED certification and training for communities. And David and I started to talk, and then we had a conversation with the foundation's program officer at the time, and proposed a $100,000 design grant to support the LEED design of the public works facility. So that actually happened, and it wouldn't have happened without David's. You know, part of the enjoyment that I get is working with people that are really interested in taking leadership. Another big sort of thing, two things. One, we've produced 24 conferences called Greentown, which we've done in 4 states since 2007. And so getting to meet mayors and other sustainability advocates. We had Bill McDonough at our first conference here in 2007 in Oak Park at Unity Temple, and he's an extraordinary thought leader in sustainability, and he wrote the book Cradle to Cradle. So getting to meet folks like Bill, and just getting to meet community leaders and seeing the learning happening, seeing the connections being made, and seeing subsequent action being taken. And then thirdly, I would say, as somebody who has worked with youth for so much of my life, either as a counselor of youth offenders in a youth prison, or a high school teacher and basketball coach, and then I coached baseball and basketball for many, many years. I love It's Our Future, and I love being able to engage youth. And taking youth out to the UN climate summits has been one of the most rewarding experiences, because at the end of the day, as you kind of alluded to earlier, Manolo, the torches are going to have to be passed. I mean, we need people of all generations to work on climate, and we need younger people to be educated, trained up, and moving into positions of leadership. And so those UN climate summits have been gratifying, because to a student, kind of flip their world upside down. It's very impressive to be with 40,000 people from almost 200 countries. It's impressive for anyone, and it's been really a pleasure for me to watch the students have that experience, and also do things afterwards like you're doing.
Nice. I can attest. Yes, it did flip my world upside down, but in a good way. And then David have one last question.
What kind of guidance you would provide to people who would be interested in the realm of sustainability, interested in getting involved in helping to make the world a better place and the planet a safer and more sustainable place going forward. So if you want to maybe talk a little bit about what you see as the outlook, and as a father of a daughter who is going to school and going to be starting college in the fall, and one of her majors will be sustainability, I'd be interested to hear from you about what you think would be important guidance for people who are considering this as an area to focus on.
Yeah, alluded to that a little bit, but I'll add some other thoughts. I mean, there are people that, of course, go to college or university, get a major, and then try to find an organization, whether it's nonprofit or working with the government, or, working for a for-profit business in clean energy or local food, or, whatever the sustainability area is. And those are all like really viable steps if you have that, fire in the belly. But as I said earlier, not everybody's cut out to be a sustainability coordinator or work for a sustainability nonprofit. But if you're a carpenter running a carpentry business, figure out ways to source sustainably grown trees in sustainable forests. If you're into fashion, look at the way fabrics are made and work on sourcing materials that are not harmful to the environment, not using harmful dyes with lots of chemicals, and getting your materials from companies that are using fair labor practices. So I use those two examples just as a way to say, you don't have to work for a sustainability nonprofit to be involved in sustainability. Follow your heart. If your heart is in fashion or carpentry or being a rocket science, whatever it is, there are going to be ways that you can integrate sustainable practices, climate change supporting, or mitigation practices into that profession. And I think we all have to kind of follow our own paths, listen to what our heart's telling us, and then figure out a way to combine those passions and interests.
Yeah, I agree. Wow, well said. Any other last words you would like to share with this community?
Yeah, I just will go back on the theme of hope. It's okay to get down, but there's so much work to be done, and actually now more than in any time, it feels like we have a large challenge in front of us, and so we have to, when one door closes, we have to figure out how to open another door, and we have to think smartly about strategies that are going to really move the needle on climate. That's something I try to do every day. Is like, okay, and it's okay to work on smaller projects periodically, but in the end of the day, we need to figure out ways to get to large decision makers and influence them to adopt sustainable practices and clean energy. We have to figure out a way to get private capital involved. And so just keep swinging the bat. And we need bat swingers more than ever.
Yes, yes. How can people stay in or get in the loop with SGA, or like, is there any events coming up that people can potentially participate in next year? I believe you have one event that's the biggest zero waste event in the Midwest, which is crazy.
Yes, if you like craft beer, we're in our 18th year of producing the Oak Park Microbrew Review. It's actually a fundraiser for our work, but it also models how you can make an event zero waste. So if you're of age and like craft beer, join us there. There's also opportunities to volunteer there if you're not of age to drink beer. But you can volunteer at the event, and we still have volunteer opportunities. And so contact us. But also, if you're interested, we tend to engage people based on our programs. Not so much create sort of general participation events, but there are always opportunities through It's Our Future if you're a student, and then if you're a political elected official and you want to get things done, please contact us. We love collaborators that are decision makers and can have, and not just elected officials, people that are running mainstream institutions in our communities. We need you to take leadership, and we're always open to working with you.
Yeah, and like if you're not sure where to start yet, or you don't really fit any of those categories, the SGA newsletter is just very informational. You just wrote a great piece on the setbacks of this administration and what it means. So there's great articles and just great information of what the organization is doing overall, and I'll put that and all the other stuff we mentioned that may have links in the episode description. But with that, thanks for coming on the podcast, Garrett.
Yeah, thanks, Manolo. I love everything that you're doing, and thank you as well.
Yeah, see you all next time.